Hey, folks, welcome back to the Jabber Chamber. Dennis Miller here. Anybody see the interview with Fidel Castro? Been away for 4 years, did some TV appearance, and I think he's auditioning to replace Larry King. That's my feeling. He's got to get that tape out there. Because a lot of the kids are going for it. But I think he wanted an avuncular, although trembling hand on the tiller. And Fidel and his brother ghostwrites for him, writes some great jokes. Poppers, one-liner. They pop. 866-509-RANT. We are joined now by Republican Congressman of Michigan and a man who needs no ghostwriter, T-Mac, Thaddeus McCotter. Welcome back to the show, Thaddeus.
Hey, Dennis.
Wow, glad to excite you. I finally met T-Mac at the Friends of Abe event out there in the field at Stonehenge, and nice to meet you, T-Mac. You're a quiet man, aren't you?
Yeah, you look beautiful in your druid robe.
You know, at 146, I was a thing of beauty, Charlie. I could have been something. Now, T-Mac left a good job in the city. Explain what you've done here.
Well, you know, everybody in America, from family budgets to the federal budget, has to be restructured. We're going through a very difficult time. The families have made those difficult decisions, and I think Republicans have to be guided by a very simple principle. Is what you're doing necessary, and if necessary, can it be done more cheaply and effectively elsewhere? And so being charged with the policy committee, I took that seriously and determined that we could take the duties and responsibilities of this advisory committee and put it into other places more cheaply and more effectively.
And was it received with open arms by the leadership?
Not a lot of open arms. We've decided to examine the issue after the November elections, which I think is fair. But I do think it's incumbent upon anybody who wants to keep it to tell me, and more importantly, the other members, where everything this advisory committee does cannot be done more cheaply and more effectively. Because in the end, you're going to be doing that with every aspect of the federal government if you get a majority, because that's what we're going to be charged with.
Well, as per usual, you can tell T-Mac not doing this for the grand gesture, or, flourishing the cape. I really believe you think, that's what I like about you. You make statements, but you make them in a pragmatic way. This job is, tell us what exactly the job is and why it's not necessary anymore in your eyes, the one who should know the best.
Well, by definition, the House Conference Rules is advisory. So you can't institute legislation from the policy committee as a committee. You already have extant standing committees. You have caucuses. You have leadership working groups. And as we went into an entrepreneurial minority, we went through a process of taking major issues and instead of putting them through the bureaucracy of a policy committee and then putting it back through the bureaucracy of leadership and the bureaucracy of everything else, we wound up actually having pretty effective entrepreneurial groups to put forward solutions on the cap and tax. Our alternative was the all-the-above energy strategy, the stimulus plan. We actually relied on people keeping their money. And with the health care, we had our own proposals, and these went through working groups. So as it evolved, in talking to the leader, we became more of a long-term think tank. And having produced the We the People pamphlet, over 150,000 of which are out in people's hands right now, the role of the committee is being finished. The ability to do what standing committees and caucuses and leadership already does is a better place for it. And you could do it more cheaply and more effectively. So it seems to me that if we're going to continue to do this throughout the entire scope of the federal government, you're going to need the credibility to be able to say that you did it to yourselves before you try to do it to someone else.
Sure. We're talking to Thaddeus McCotter, Republican Congressman of Michigan. I guess the guy you have to present this to is who? The whip, Eric Cantor? Or who do you go to when you formulate the idea that the job may no longer be necessary?
We have to go through the entire conference. And again, that's why I think that in talking to Eric, it makes sense to see what other reforms come out of this, because this is not the only entity that is going to be having to ask this question and answer it honestly. So to see how it fits in with the overarching restructuring of the Republican Party, should we be lucky enough to get a majority, or I would argue even in the minority, is something that the next conference will vote on. Because again, Dennis, it's a conference rule to have this. It's kind of been there searching for an identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that the people who are coming in the door, the people who are running on fiscal responsibility, who are running on making government more of a effective entity that costs you less,
have to walk the walk.
will be the ones who will have to vote on it.
Let me ask you this, T-Mac. A lot of people in my listenership, and I think out here in general, cling to the idea that if the House flips in November, there will be an effort afoot, I would hope the next morning, to defund Obamacare. You're in there. Do you sense that might be the play?
I sense that would be the most realistic play and support it. Getting 2/3 to be able to pass a repeal and have a president sign it, or have the president veto it, and then have us override him, does not look like a realistic option.
No, that's not.
It's just the numbers of seats that we would have to win in the Senate, actually, I don't think augur well for that, let alone the House. So when you think about it, the power of the purse, all spending bills originate in the House, would be where you would have to stop its implementation prior to a national referendum during a presidential election.
It's interesting to me, Thaddeus, and once again we're talking to T-Mac, Thaddeus McCotter, Republican congressman of Michigan. They have the Think Fest up in Aspen, and the liberals, and indeed especially the liberal businessmen, are really starting, Zuckerman's off the reservation, although it's sort of like that David Frum thing saying I penned Axis of Evil. It seemed like Mort sometime might have went off the reservation against Barack so he could say that he wrote one of his speeches. But especially the business community, they get it now. This guy's not a fan of what they do for a living, and it doesn't appear to me that even liberal members of the business community are as big a fans of him anymore, right?
Well, I think that they're waking up to the reality that this is not a center-left administration. It's a left administration.
Far left.
It's premised upon the redistribution of wealth, a sense of entitlement. And so when you're the actual people producing that wealth and you're the ones going to work every single day trying to make ends meet, and you find out that the administration thinks that somehow you're having things a little too good, and that your money is a little too much that you earn, and that it should be sent elsewhere, it makes it very difficult for people to invest. It makes it very difficult for the economy to grow. Fundamentally, Dennis, this administration believes your prosperity is from the public sector, not the private sector. Obviously, as a Republican, as a conservative, I think it's absolutely backwards. I think the greatest economy in world history, most prosperous and equitable, has been the American economy, and it was built by the American people, not the government.
Well, listen, guys like Berwick are airdropping in onto the platform that is the American economy in an effort to put it out. And that Berwick appointment, especially during hiatus, sends a chill up my spine. He, of course, for the listeners, the man who's been appointed, in essence, to head up Medicare and Medicaid right now. And if you ever hear his Wembley Stadium speech about the redistribution of wealth, it's debonairly, granted his delivery is debonair, but it's chilling, isn't it?
Oh, yes. It's one of the aspects that Americans have difficulty, I think, really facing up to, as I think a lot of us did, is we had always worked within the paradigm of a center-left, center-right. And what you're seeing now outside of that policy paradigm is an administration that is far left. And I think many Americans are very shocked by the fact that they thought they might be getting some new Democrat, much like Bill Clinton was, that was pro-business. Instead, what they're seeing is one that is pro-redistribution. And when you see the individuals who are appointed, and you see their past statements, and you see their professed political ideologies, it does send a chill up people's spines.
Yeah, and one should remember that a lot of the things they tentpole off of are moves towards redistribution of wealth. Even that green jobs thing. When was the last time you think that Van Jones, in his real life, separated his plastics from his papers and stuff? I mean, what is this green job thing if not a cloaking device to slip through some wealth redistribution? Is my thoughts. And now they're going to do it with Berwick over at Medicare and Medicaid. I don't know, T-Mac. You got to put the skids on this in November, baby. Start defunding left and right. It's like throwing ballast out of a balloon that has a pinhole in it. Just start dumping ballast. Promise me.
I promise, Dennis, we'll put the skids on health care, not our underwear.
Well, there's an outline if I've ever heard one. Thank you, T-Mac, the Republican congressman of Michigan. Back right after this on the Dennis